Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Malrias' Musings. This is Malrias. So, I know it's been a minute since I dropped a video here. And that was a false start to Season 2 of Mary Jane Strain Review. Well, there's been a lot of changes going on. Internal growth and progression. I've changed jobs since I started this channel. Then changed locations, and then got promoted to full-time. Then there was the new car, moved into a new house. It's been a lot of change. Things have settled down enough to where I can start making content again, so here I am. But speaking of recent progress and etc., in the course of my growth the last few years, I have learned a lot about myself. For one, I'm a very spiritual person, and I am also highly spiritually gifted and practiced as well. Now, this wasn't a recent surprise, but necessary to preface for the rest to make sense. Secondly, I am very responsive to Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology hasn't just helped me figure myself out better. It has helped me to model my life and my actions in a way that serves my community and my psychology at the same time. Thirdly, I would say, along with the concepts of Jungian psychology, my self-archetype is that of a seer or a shaman, if you will. I would also say that my persona has its own full-fledged archetype personality, that of the jester or the performer. This being the case, I created multiple YouTube channels to reflect different aspects of my personality. I have another channel, Esoteric Christians, or the Society of Esoteric Christians, where I prefer to discuss the more spiritual side of things. Then there is this channel, Malrias' Musings, where I prefer to be more of the jester or the entertainer. Now, when it comes to spiritual gifting, or psychic gifts, or whatever you want to call them, there seems to be two greater aspects. There is the connection to the outside, what you pick up in the spiritual realm or what have you. And there is the connection to the inside. That is what you pick up within your own intuition. My past, as I am sure many of you can relate, is a mixture of good things and bad things. On one hand, I had a pretty serious spiritual initiation at a young age with opportunity to cultivate those gifts throughout the course of my life. On the other hand, I was a victim of trauma and abuse, which tends to cause one to distrust themselves. So I had developed this odd combination of gifts to where I could trust the divine message I would receive, but then distrust my own gut feelings. This is one of the things that drew me to tarot. That and how it related to the various aspects of my personality, as well as my recent progression and my ability to utilize my gifts. When it comes to spiritual gifts or psychic gifts or whatever you want to call them, as I said before, this is not an area I lack expertise. This is kind of my wheelhouse. So there are a lot of methods that I am aware of and practice. Not to mention the fact that I just get quote-unquote psychic hits, as they call them, without doing any kind of practice. With that being said, tarot is not my preferred method of divination. I have sometimes affectionately described it as quick and dirty psychic work. Honestly, I often get better answers out of the tea leaves, but that's just me. For me, 99% of the time, it is very short-term stuff and often covers the more mundane aspects of life. However, this can and has been a utility in and of itself. But it is the leaning on your gut aspect of tarot that has been such a big help for me. For another way I have described tarot is the bench press for my intuition. As I said before, I felt deficient in this, and, to be honest with you, throwing cards has made me a better listener to my gut. It didn't really hit me until just now writing the script, but tarot has actually helped me recover from some of the damages due to childhood and adulthood traumas. I believe in all of my abilities more since I started throwing cards. But do I take my big questions to the cards? Not really, except for confirmation or clarification after using other methods. So why am I posting this content here instead of the spiritual channel? Well, it comes down to the thing I mentioned earlier about tarot covering different sides of my personality. You see, tarot obviously touches the seer side of my personality, the self. But tarot also has this exotic, sexy performance side to it, which obviously appeals to the entertainer, jester side of me. And since it cradles both sides of my world, I felt it landed better on this channel for other obvious reasons. And that being said, I may just start posting regular tarot readings here on Malraius's Musings. That is the quick and brief story about how and why I got into tarot. But perhaps I should give more musings on the topic of tarot itself. What has been my takeaway? Well, the word tarot comes from the Italian word tarocchi, which was a tricks game that included something called trump cards, which were worth more points, or something. I don't really play tarocchi, but you get my point. Cartomancy, or divination using cards, is a practice as old as cards themselves. If I were to use a taxonomy to organize psychic gifts and tools, and I just may do that, I would put cartomancy under the charms clave. Charms, lots, cards, and dice kinda all follow the same premise. Objects were given significance, objects were cast, objects were interpreted based on how or what landed. The shuffled tarot deck itself provides the element of randomness. Dealing and casting are equivalent. And of course, tarot cards, lots, charms, and runes are all interpreted not just by what is on the object and what it symbolizes, but also how that symbol interacts with the place it landed or was dealt on. And the Tarocchi deck itself goes way back as far as we have completed decks of cards. Some of the earliest decks that we still have intact are Tarocchi decks. Except they were not like the tarot decks that we are familiar with today. The only Tarocchi cards that had images were the trump cards. And those images weren't made for the purpose of divination. They were just decorative cards made for the game. The meanings were assigned after the fact. And while a lot of occultists wrote about cartomancy in the old days, most of the practitioners were old grandmothers rather than occultists. I don't have any data on that, but that's the impression one gets. And those old grandmas didn't learn from occultists. They learned from their grandmas. But I digress. So, there are a couple of keystone decks. There is the Thoth deck, which I am not going to even get into. Just no, just fuck it, no. Then there's the Marseille deck, which we're going to come back to. And then there's the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. The Waite-Smith deck is the one that you are probably familiar with. Now you may say, hey, my deck is the Alice in Wonderland deck. Nah, bitch. It's just a Waite-Smith deck that's been reskinned. And this is where I say that tarot kind of became forever married to the occult, because where the earlier decks were devoid of specific occult meaning, the Waite-Smith deck has 100% more occult on each card. It was a deck specifically made by and for a group of occultists. There are astrological symbols hidden everywhere and other symbolic inferences. The best part about it is that these things rarely come up in a reading, if ever at all. Yet they are in there all the same. But the images that the wonderful Pamela Smith made for these cards became the basis of a lot of the symbology that gets reskinned in modern decks. Often without all the hidden shit, but it's based on her art. The classic Smith deck is the one I learned on. I don't knock it. I just ignore all the occult references. And I'm not shit-talking the deck. It just is what it is. I even still use it, but I have found a better preference. I like the Marseille deck. The Marseille deck is basically either the oldest or one of the oldest complete decks we have. Only the trump cards have pictures. The rest are pick cards. They were at least a couple hundred years before the Waite-Smith, so it is like I am going even closer to the root and what have you. This being the case, the ace through tens have just to do with the number and suits. For instance, the 10 of wands just have 10 wands on it. It does not feature some version of some person carrying 10 wands on their back or something, like we see in the Smith deck. The meanings are interpreted based on the number and suit. Anyways, let us see how this goes. This is all I have to say about tarot at the moment. This is more intended to be an introductory musing. But now that things are beginning to settle down in my life and to stabilize, I think I can now consistently devote hours per week to my channels. The Society of Esoteric Christians channel has priority, of course. This channel will probably start featuring readings from now on, and hopefully Mary Jane Strain Review Season 2.1 will be a success. And with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up. Catch you on the flip side, my friends.